Okay, and welcome to another episode of the Arborist Growth Partners podcast. And I am extremely thrilled to have Joe Boffa with me from Rainbow EcoScience. Joe, you're the Rocky Mountain Territory Manager, which sounds exciting to me. How are you doing today?
I'm doing very well. Thank you for having me.
Awesome. Thanks for coming on, for sure. Before I dig into who you are, I'm going to ask you that question that I ask everybody. And that's from your point of view. What is the thing that allows tree service companies to survive and thrive rather than not doing very well at all?
Well, I think a lot of people might say it's their skew of services, but really I think it's how they provide that service to their clients. We talk about it internally a lot, what sets us apart from anybody else, and I think you can apply this to any business, is we pick up the phone. When people call, if your clients have advice or need advice rather, just making yourself available is one of the biggest things that I see set some of my own clients apart from those that are successful and those that are either struggling or maybe failing.
That is so true. One of the things that I find is tree service companies do not pick up the phone.
Yeah, it's tough.
And if I'm trying to get a job done or something like that, surely you got to answer the phone and give me a
Think.
quote or something like that. But even when I call our own clients, it's very difficult to get hold of them sometimes. And a couple of them have said the biggest, best first investment that they've put in is somebody in the office, an office manager, or
Huge.
even if you're a one-person company, having somebody answer the phones for you can make a big difference.
Absolutely. And there's with the advent of so much technology coming out now, that can take a lot of different forms, I think.
Uh-huh.
I have a lot of owner operator clients that it's their fiance or their wife or whatever, and they kind of work part-time at doing the office thing, but I think there's a lot of AI tools now that'll kind of do it for you. So
Yes.
if you can get someone or something in that seat, I think that's really important.
Some of those AI tools are hilarious, though.
Yeah.
You could just record a message. Some of them take you through this whole path of 10 minutes worth of asking a question. I'm
Yeah.
not sure if we're quite there yet, but who
No,
knows?
probably not. Maybe just a voicemail, a good one.
Good voicemail. So, Joe, tell us about yourself and who you are and what you do.
Sure. Yeah. So, like you mentioned earlier, I'm the Rocky Mountain Territory Manager for Rainbow EcoScience. That's kind of just a bunch of fancy words. At the end of the day, I provide my clients, which are typically tree care companies, sometimes landscape, with training, education, sales support. We're also a sole source distributor for a lot of different proprietary chemicals. So we'll provide them with chemical treatments, the equipment to do those treatments, which we also manufacture. And yeah, I cover Utah, Colorado, Wyoming, Montana, and I make it to all of those states pretty often. The biggest thing for me is being there in person when somebody needs to learn how to do something. I mean, that's the only way I really know how to learn. I can't really look at a YouTube video or take advice over the phone. I need to get hands on. So that's one of the biggest things I do and what takes up a lot of my time.
So, how does your day to day look? I'm curious to sort of dig into that because trainer, educator, the company provides chemicals and equipment for plant healthcare, and you work with tree service companies. So, I'd love to dig into day to day.
Sure.
First off,
Yeah. So, I mean, it changes a lot. Just for example, last week was what I would call a relatively busy week for myself. So, I mean, Monday, kind of try to stay the same. I need at least one day of the week where I can just do my office work, whether that's responding to emails or doing technical calls. We do a lot of internal meetings that day. So those are typically how my Mondays look. But moving past Monday last week, I mean, I took a 4-hour drive to Grand Junction after a full day of training within the Denver Metro. So we did some injection trainings and we did some site walks and some sales ride-alongs, and that was from 7 a.m. to about 3 p.m. And after that point, I hopped in my truck and I drove over the that section of the Rockies, and I was on the western slope, and then kind of did that exact same thing there for that day and then drove on back. And then I went to Cheyenne, Wyoming, kind of did a little bit more of it there. Yeah, so I would say during the season of like April to September, most of my days involve some kind of in-person hands-on training, and then that kind of gets peppered in with either virtual meetings, maybe meetings in person. Yeah, it's kind of a switch up. I do a lot of stuff all the time.
A lot of traveling. Who are you training then? Is it owners of companies or
Oh,
people
it
who are doing
depends. So,
applications?
I think for those companies that might be kind of small to middling size for plant healthcare departments, the person I'm training a lot of times is either an owner or manager,
Hmm.
because realistically, they are probably also the applicator. When you start to scale up a little bit, I might be moving on to training with an operations manager or the technician themselves a lot of the time, which, once you get to a certain scale, technician and the manager, whatever that's operations manager, market leader, sales manager, are oftentimes not the same person anymore.
Hmm.
Um, so yeah, it's usually the end user, but the end user kind of changes depending on the size of the company.
Hmm. I know, what is plant healthcare? It's a buzzword that I hear more and more, and I know some people who have tree service companies, and we've spoken about it before on the podcast. They have the cutting side of things, and now they're bringing in the plant healthcare side. I mean, what is it? Why do we need it? And why should anybody start to get into that?
Sure. I think it's a pretty complex question, and I think it means a lot of different things to different people. But if I had to kind of put a peg in it, I would say it's a program that is kind of helping them to manage the aesthetics of your
Mm.
landscape as well as the health. And what that can mean is, some people think plant healthcare and they think chemical applications. Oh, we're spraying for an insect or we're injecting something systemically. But I mean, doing fertilizer, that's plant healthcare. Managing soil health, that's plant healthcare. Managing your watering regime,
Mm.
that's plant healthcare.
Right.
I think that's kind of interdisciplinary between tree care and maybe a lot of other green industries. But at the end of the day, that's what that means to me.
I'm just curious. Do you work with tree service companies, but do you also work with people like landscapers uh, who do plant healthcare as well?
I do, much less frequently, and that's, I think, a little bit of my shortcoming. I'm a tree guy, kind
Mm.
of through and through. Longtime arborist to green forestry, and that's what I love. I love to do it. I love to be around them. I love to work with tree people that are also geeking out about trees. With that being said, I have a smattering of landscape clients that do plant healthcare, and it takes a
Mm.
little bit of a different form. For landscape companies, I think it's often an add-on
Mm.
service
Mm.
more than anything. So either they're kind of putting a separate contract on a property that they're managing and saying, oh, we're going to treat for this scale on this property, and that'll be $350 add-on or whatever it might be. And in a lot of different ways, they're incorporating those services into their already existing model, and they're not necessarily charging anything extra for it, but it's saving them labor.
Mm.
So they take that labor and they move it somewhere else, and that's how they kind of justify the
Mm.
service itself, which is interesting. I'm not super used to that because tree care, it's usually very cut and dry the way you sell plant healthcare by
Mhm.
comparison.
Right. Okay. And as a tree service company, then am I, am I right in thinking that I have to be really on the ball with in terms of tree biology and knowing everything there is to know about trees with
I
regards to
think it
plant
depends
healthcare?
on where you want to start.
Oh,
There's really
okay.
generalized service. So if you want to be a company that offers supplemental watering and fertilization and maybe some kind of root color improvement service, I mean, sure, it helps to know basic tree biology and basic soil health, but there's a low entry cost and a low learning curve, I think, for
Mm.
something like that. And it's very seldomly are we going to put down a low risk fertilizer and have it be a high risk.
Right.
um, Whereas, when you're treating trees specifically for specific pests, you need to know about that pest development timing. You need to know
Mm,
which chemicals work and for how long and how they're applied. You also need to keep up licensure in whatever
mm,
state that you may be applying in, which is very, very important. Um, I think there is an entry level into plant healthcare for anybody, and I don't think it needs to be scary. But with that being said, I think there is a lot to learn.
mm. And I get why would I get into it then? As somebody who let's put some context into this. I was speaking to somebody a couple of weeks ago, and they're a fairly small operation. They're really just getting going with their business, and they're doing the usual tree removals, emergency services, stump grinding, that kind of thing. And they also have deep root fertilization as a service, and we got to talking about plant healthcare and something that they want to start getting into, but they're somehow scared about the the barrier to entry as a small company.
Sure. Well, what I would say to them, and I think deep root fertilization is a great place to start because that barrier of entry is the equipment that you have to apply it with, essentially. I don't know of any states in the US that really require a special license to apply fertilizer. And it's really, really
Mm.
hard to do any kind of significant harm doing a service like that. Um, Something I talk to my clients about a lot of like the kind of why to get into plant healthcare. I use a comparison. Even with something like a deep root fertilization route, let's say you have an 8-hour day planned for a tree crew, and then you have an 8-hour day planned for a single plant healthcare operator.
Mhm.
Let's say the tree crew is 3 people. Maybe you can expect them really big day, no extraneous equipment besides, rope and saddle, and maybe they have a bucket truck and a chipper. Great. Maybe you can expect 6 to 8 grand out of them in that day. And that's 3 people. You split that 3 ways, 2 to 3 point
Mm.
something per person. Uh, you can make that per person and exceed it probably fairly easily with a single operator.
Mm.
Is there equipment that is required to do some of that? Absolutely. But for the most part, it's pretty low overhead cost.
Mm. Okay, so you can just get started, and I we had a podcast interview a little while ago, and it was the same sort of idea. You could get started small, and then you can expand your services as you go.
Yeah,
And you could do that because it seems to me like it's a good margin business as well.
incredibly so. Yeah.
What do the numbers look like on that compared to, say,
Oh,
the
it
cutting crew?
depends, I think. When we're talking about plant healthcare services, I would say if you're getting 60% margins,
Mm.
that might be even a little low. I mean,
Oh,
there are
really?
some, yeah, there are some
Wow.
services that they're specialized, sure. But if you take a look at labor, product cost, and equipment cost, I mean, you can be pushing into like the 85% very easily.
Huh.
And it,
Okay.
it, it looks crazy to watch that on paper and be like, oh, there's one person doing this. And then you start to fold in, what are the
Mm.
costs of gas? What does your routing density look like? Um, what are the benefits that your employee might be receiving as you scale upwards and upwards? And that fluctuates a little bit, but really, really high margins.
That's interesting to a business.
Yeah, I
Or
agree.
should be,
It should be.
right?
Oh,
Um,
excuse me.
no worries. The phone's ringing. We forgot to put out the PDF. Turn phones off.
Yeah, let me do that right now, actually.
If you got to take it, take it.
No, no worries. All
We
right.
could do amazing editing here. One of the other questions that I had as well is with plant healthcare, then presumably where you're going and how you're doing the work is important as well, the routes that you choose, etc. And we talk a lot about CRMs in the industry. Is there any one piece of software that you would recommend for plant healthcare management? I'm
Well,
curious because I've not heard of much at all.
yeah, I I don't have one in particular that I would recommend necessarily.
Hmm.
They all have their upsides and downsides. I have a lot of clients who use single ops. I like single ops because it is very customizable. And I think, if you're
Hmm.
talking about kind of branding yourself client facing wise, it can be really nice the way it puts out bids into clients, and you can kind of tailor make what your services
Hmm.
are called. You can put in your own tree inventory. With that being said, I find it to be pretty clunky as well.
Hmm.
Takes a lot of doing to get to that point of streamlined. They are getting better with their support, which I appreciate. And then you have CRMs like Arbor Gold that are very, very tailored towards the tree care industry in general. And I think they do a pretty good job with
Hmm.
tracking plant healthcare, but I don't know. I've heard a lot of things about their inventory software getting a little buggy and having problems. So I don't think there's a silver bullet. I wish there was. Because
Never is,
I
right?
wish, yeah, I really wish I could just say, hey, go with this one. It's my favorite. But
Yeah.
I've
I
seen a
mean,
lot of pros and cons.
yeah, yeah. I mean, how do you get customers for plant healthcare? Again, like if I wanted to start my own plant healthcare division, maybe it's me, a couple of guys. We're a small company. How do we even get customers? How do we plan the way that we do work? Do you advise on that sort of thing at all?
Yeah, yeah. Well, I think it's easy's not the right word, but I think it is nice when you are a pre-existing tree care company that maybe
Mm,
hasn't done plant healthcare before, but has a, sizable client list already. I find that a lot of tree care
mm,
companies, especially in places like where I live, like in Denver, where plant healthcare is very prevalent here. I mean, we live in an environment where if you plant a tree and it isn't getting outside inputs of some kind, it's
mm,
not going to last.
mm,
So, in cases like those, especially when you already have a list of clients, chances are they're probably using somebody for some kind of plant health care,
right, right.
and making it known to them that, say, hey, you trust me to do your work. We work well together. We've worked together for X amount of time. We're starting to offer this, whether that's deep root
Mm.
fertilization, maybe it's protecting against bark beetles in the state, maybe it's just general insect control for mites and aphids. But I think people respond to people they trust. And if you already have those clients in your back pocket, I don't think it's a big ask to kind of bring that up.
A lot of tree companies don't talk to their existing clients. That's one of the other things, right? I find is you got a list of people you can reach out to, but you never do.
Absolutely. Yeah, yeah. And I mean,
Yeah.
it's an interesting concept because for plant healthcare, that is different because you need to at least be on property, whether that's you or a technician or whatever,
Right.
once or twice a year, hopefully.
Yeah, I guess you're not going there every week, right?
No, no. I mean, unreasonable and probably impossible.
How does it normally work in terms of treatments and actually how do you even prove or convince the homeowner that it's working or it's a
Sure.
valuable thing that they should be doing?
Well, I really believe in arming yourself with knowledge, and
Mm,
that's where kind of that learning curve comes in, right? So some things are easy. Um, you know, Emerald ash borer is very prevalent where I am. So if you're in a high infestation area and you say, hey, let's look at your neighbor's trees, they
mm,
didn't treat and they are in heavy decline. If we treat yours, you're going to see by next season how much more that tree is declined versus
right,
yours. Those are
right.
the really obvious things, but then there's things that aren't so obvious, like soil nutrition, watering regimes.
Mm,
I mean, these things for trees can happen over the course of 3 to 5 years, and suddenly a client's calling you saying, I don't know, just last night it lost all of its leaves. It wasn't last night. Maybe that's when all
right.
that damage manifested. But being able to convey that to your clients to say, hey,
Mm,
trees work on a very different time scale than us. And it doesn't even necessarily mean that was abuse on their part. It could have been, I was at a client's house the other
mm,
day and they were really concerned. They had just bought the house a year ago and they had two beautiful blue spruces that were going through some really heavy needle casting. And they said, oh, I don't know, we winter in the water or water in the winter and we do this and that and the other. And, you start to establish a timeline. Well, you bought this house a year and a half ago. What was the former owner doing? Turns out they had done some massive landscape construction back there,
Mm.
severed a bunch of roots. And that's something that, unless they really would have dug into it, they never would have known. And if me, as a consulting arborist, would have never done that, I never would have known, and we probably never would have gotten to the end of it. So I
Mm.
think
Mm.
that level of convincing comes from knowing what you're talking about and being able to get down to the bottom of it too. It's not just kind of having that ephemeral information floating
Right.
around. It's knowing how to use it.
Your tree needs fixing, trust me.
Yep. It's a
Let's
hard
do a
thing to
better
ask.
job than that. But yeah, it's funny actually. We were just talking now. I had my previous house where I lived. We had a huge. I don't even know what it was. Big tree, and it definitely had problems. And now I know something about the industry, and I know something a little bit about plant healthcare. I could see that probably I should have had an arborist come out, take a look at it, give me some recommendations, and it just didn't occur to me.
Sure.
You know,
It doesn't occur to a
and
lot of people.
nobody came to me to suggest that they would be the people to take a look at it either. And I might have listened to them if they had, So it's that it's it's the difficulty of connecting the homeowner with the tree company as well is something that I was just thinking about.
Yeah,
You know,
absolutely.
I don't know if it's door hangers or
A lot of different ways to
direct
do it,
mail or
you know. I think the door hangers and physical marketing, I like it. I think it's good, and maybe that's a little old fashioned of me, but
it still works.
I think it's really, yeah, I think it can be really
Yeah,
effective.
yeah. That's interesting. And we were talking about licenses as well. Is licensing is something that you need when you start a plant healthcare division? Is that
If you're
per
planning
state or
on
per region?
using what we call, you know, regulated or restricted chemicals in a commercial
Mm,
setting, then typically yes. Um, and that takes a different form in almost every state.
mm,
Oftentimes it's very similar, the kind of path that you're taking is you're establishing some kind of knowledge by taking a test that comes from the Department of Agriculture, your state
right,
Department of Agriculture.
right.
Different requirements abound. But after that point, you pass that test, specifically your commercial applicator test. And then there might be a few other hurdles to jump through. But then you apply for a commercial applicator business
Mm.
license, and then you can kind of get to it after that point.
Okay, so it's if you're starting off with something simple, you wouldn't need necessarily licensing. You
No,
just need the
no.
education to get
Yeah,
into it, a little bit of equipment, and then as you start adding services and certain treatments and chemicals, that's where you've got to be aware.
exactly.
And
Yeah.
and
And
is that where somebody like you comes in to
so
advise?
so somebody like me, um, I can be kind of helping you out with a lot of different things, but what I do most is I'm a safety and skills trainer.
Mm,
In the field anyway. I also offer sales and all these other things, but if you're calling me to prepare yourself, more than likely I'm going to be on site with you. I'm going to be teaching you how to use whatever piece of equipment it may be, how to properly dose your chemicals,
mm.
what those are actually going to be used for, what they're not going to be effective for. Yeah.
Okay, so how did you get into the plant healthcare side of things? You were an arborist before, and you moved into this area, I
Yeah,
guess.
so I like to say my boots have very rarely left the ground. I
Ah,
have been in plant healthcare for almost my whole tenure as a tree care worker and arborist.
mm,
I started off in West Chicago. That's kind of abouts the area where I'm from. And initially, I was working with rope and saddle. I was doing trim. I was doing removal. Uh, and that was kind of a very short period of time. It's when I first got into the industry, and I was kind of working as an apprentice of sorts. And about 3, 4 months in of kind of trying to gather all of these different skills, they said, "Oh well, let's put the new guy on Dutch elm disease treatments." which at the
Ah,
time I didn't know, but nobody wanted to do. So they were like,
right.
yeah, throw this guy at it. He's college educated and he can go figure this out himself. So after a lot of trial and error, I did that for probably another month and a half. And despite their best efforts to kind of bum me out about it, I really, really enjoyed it.
That's
And
cool.
yeah, I like the technical aspect of it. I like
Uh-huh.
the kind of tree biology, tree physiology aspect of
Mm.
it. And it really opened up my mind to all of the different things that you could do without being what somebody might consider like a traditional climbing arborist.
Right. That's interesting. But it seems to me, and again, I'm going to be completely naive here. It seems to me like it's almost you treat a tree, but you don't see any results. How it's not very satisfying, is it?
Sure, sure. Yeah, no, there isn't much instant gratification in plant healthcare. I can say that much. I mentioned earlier about how trees work on just frankly a different time scale.
Yeah.
You cut off a
Yeah.
limb, you can see that immediately,
Right.
and you can kind of see what benefit that brings. You're opening up the canopy, more wind exposure, more light. Great, we see that today. What I like about plant healthcare, although maybe not very satisfying for the customer or the person doing it, depending on your perspective, is the long term effects that you can have by altering soil chemistry, nutrient
Mm.
composition, moisture levels. That's going to have a really profound effect on the tree. Do you see it immediately? No, but you could see it as early as next year, maybe later in the season. And I think those are much farther reaching effects in a lot of ways than your traditional arborist work
Mm.
might be. Not to say uh, the pruning and removal side isn't incredibly important as well, because it absolutely is. And a lot of times they work in conjunction with plant healthcare. For example, you're treating a tree for fire blight, which is just an incredibly common bacterial disease everywhere in North America, more or less. Yeah, you could throw some antibiotic at it. You could use some growth regulator. Maybe that'll mute the expression of the disease. But without eradicative pruning, I mean, you're not really doing
Right.
much in the long term.
Mm.
So, I think a lot of these things go hand in hand.
Mm.
Not to say you can't do just one or the other, but yeah, I get a lot of satisfaction because looking over that really long time scale, that's when you see the exciting things of plant
Mm.
healthcare. You see
Yeah.
trees really turn around in that time. Whereas,
Right.
yeah, I could hack off these limbs and we're going to make X, Y, and Z better and maybe make it more aesthetically pleasing. But in the long run, what's making the regeneration and the preservation, that's all plant healthcare.
Mm. And that's interesting. You're saying they're complementary to each other as well. That's
Absolutely.
pretty interesting. What about reactions from homeowners, etc.? Do you have do plant healthcare specialists have a lot of oh, thanks for fixing up my tree. It's a year later. It's amazing.
No, frankly, you probably
I'm
don't
just
see
curious.
a whole lot of that. Well, I will say this much. When I first started in plant healthcare, I was an applicator for, probably 5 or 6
Mm.
years before I moved into any other form of managing or training or whatever. Over that long period of time, I had my regular customers, and it was a really special opportunity. Didn't see this all the time, but
Mm.
being able to meet with that person multiple times a year, year after year, sometimes you as the applicator, because you're at 20, 25 properties a day, you might not even see that big improvement over that long period of time, but I guarantee you that client will,
Yeah.
especially if they're seeing you over and over and over again. And I really think that the applicator is some of the best marketing that you can have
Mm.
for your company.
Interesting.
Yeah, I mean
That is
they have
interesting.
a lot of touches on properties compared to your salesman, compared to your manager.
Yes.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's huge.
I mean, a friendly face, go in there, you kit it out, you got the logo, the truck and so forth. I guess that's a walking billboard,
Yeah,
especially
100%.
especially if you're a friend to the homeowner as well,
Yeah, 100%. Yeah,
right?
because I mean, you develop that relationship, and
Yeah, yeah,
I think if you are passionate about what you do, and you at least seem like you know what you're talking about, then people are going to really respect that.
Yeah, and I guess it's true the other way as well. When when people go to work on the trees, pruning or removals, etc., training your staff to be looking at other things in the property that could be related to plant healthcare or other services as well could really help a business, right?
Absolutely. I mean, you're getting a perspective as a climber or just a tree care worker in general that most plant healthcare folks, especially if that's all they've ever done, they're just not getting it and they're
Mm,
probably not going to get it. You know, I can count the number of times on two hands that I've had the opportunity in a plant healthcare scenario anyway to like hop in a bucket and do a canopy inspection. Usually I'm from the ground. I have a lot of different tools,
mm,
binoculars, scopes, whatever, but it's really not the same.
mm. That's pretty interesting. Yeah, I guess. I- again, I talk to people about different things they can do in their company to grow the company, and it seems like we, as businesses, we don't have a lot of imagination. We hit a ceiling. We don't like. What do we do now? We've got to, I don't know, 1.5 million per year. How do we grow it? Do we put more money into ads? Do we do this? Do we do this? I guess you could just bring everybody together and think about different ways teams could work together to educate homeowners or look for other opportunities, etc.
Sure. Yeah. I
Um,
mean, I think plant healthcare is nice because the people investment compared to other tree care operations is fairly low. You
mm,
could have a $1.5 million tree care company and say, okay, well, we need a guy that's going to work from April to September doing plant health care, and he's going to be the only one doing it. And he's realistically going to be bringing in per man hour as much or more than our tree care guys. And, I think that's fantastic.
mm, yeah. Is plant healthcare becoming more important with the change to climate and things like that?
Absolutely. Yeah. Um,
And
you know,
why
it,
why is that? Is it just because we're modern society and we notice the trees more than we did in the past, or is it environmental?
well, I think it's a little bit of both. I think we can't forget about the environmental aspect. I think about this winter that we've had, and probably the subsequent last two or three, a lot drier than normal, a lot warmer
Mm,
than normal. I mean, we had, oh, in recorded Colorado history, we had the warmest December in 130 years.
mm,
Uh, and this isn't an isolated event. I mean, we've been trending towards this. We've been getting less moisture, less snowpack, less subsequent runoff because of that. In in an environment where what we would consider secondary pests are now becoming what we might consider primary pests,
mhm, mhm,
just because of the stress that trees are going under because of these environmental changes. I mean, plant healthcare is more
mm.
important than ever. And I want to go back to it. That doesn't necessarily mean shellacking trees with chemicals or
Right,
you know
right.
doing all of these kind of scary things that need licenses. Plant healthcare can mean watering, managing your
Tree
inputs into your
care.
environment. It's tree care. It really
Yeah,
is.
yeah. And that's I guess if I have trees on my property, I can do my own plant health care to a point as
100%.
well, right?
Absolutely. Yeah.
I've seen my neighbors last year. They got a whole bunch of trees put in the yard. I don't know whether it was done correctly or not. A few of them
Yeah.
died pretty
That's part of
quickly.
it.
So,
That's another part of it.
um, and I was thinking to myself, if I had invested all that money, I would try and educate myself a little bit about, you know, how to how to nurture those trees and
Absolutely.
do what I could.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I mean, that's another thing we look at a lot is planting practices
Mm,
because they're wide and varied. And, when we talk about ISA, there's standards there, very clear standards. But who planted your trees? Was
hmm
it an ISA certified arborist? Probably not.
I think it was a bunch of teenagers next
Yep.
door. Right.
Yep. Not surprised, not surprised. And oftentimes, even landscapers, where one of their primary spring and fall services
Mm,
is planting any kind of plant material, whether it's a tree or a shrub or whatever.
Mm.
And it's not their fault in my mind, because there's no level of standardization outside of a
Mm.
few like accredited organizations.
Yeah,
So you don't know what you don't know, right?
exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Unfortunately, for the person who's bought the trees,
Yeah. Well,
it can be a problem, but
yeah, certainly.
interesting. And what about, I'm curious about the pests and the problems that we're having with the beetles and so forth, whether that's becoming more prevalent. We had George Trott on a podcast a couple of weeks back from the UK, and he was saying that plant healthcare isn't such a big thing in the UK at the moment. They don't have the kind of pest problems that we have in North America.
Yeah, I think, you know, outside of, well, yeah, it's it's going to be a bad year, at least in the Intermountain West, for a
Mm,
lot of different issues. And then, if we look at North America as a whole and we look at like our invasive species, that's always a tough one because, we talked about how this is a really dry and warm winter, and that fuels a lot of these, especially native pests, because they
mm,
like a stress tree. We got a lot of stress trees.
right.
Alternatively, we look at invasive pests like the emerald ash borer, spotted lanternfly, some adelgids we have in the Northeast. They don't care if a tree's healthy,
Mm,
if a tree's stressed. They're going after it. That's a preferred host for them. And, within their life cycle, they're going to cause a lot of damage to that tree. And if unchecked, they're going to take that tree down. So, I mean, when I think about the issues that we're facing endemically, at least in Colorado, it's going to be a bad year. We just haven't had the water that
mm,
necessitates the recovery over the winter. We haven't had the water that just builds a healthy tree environment. The heat certainly doesn't help in the unseasonable parts of the season. And then we also have our invasive cohort
mm,
that is just naturally spreading across the Front Range
mm.
because we have a lot of ash trees here.
And how do we fight back against that?
Well, there's a number of different ways, but it's the name of the game is always prevention.
Mm,
So doing curative treatments, while not impossible for any of these pests, is very, very difficult.
right.
The level of monitoring that I think is a necessity to really determine where the tree's at after, like, post infestation, it's prohibitive for tree care companies to do.
Mm,
So it really is a roll of the dice if you say, oh, well, I know this tree has emerald ash borer. I know this tree has mountain pine beetle, which, are tree killers. It's really hard to say what the extent of that damage already is
right.
and weighing it against, frankly, a very expensive treatment.
Right.
Whereas you can take that same treatment at, maybe a lower rate because you're treating preventatively, and you can have a more reliable,
Mm.
focused approach that is going to be a lot more effective.
So I'm hearing we need to, again, speaking from a homeowner's point of view, is see what I have on my property in terms of the health of my trees. I don't have a problem now necessarily, but maybe I want to be aware of these pests and these problems in the area, and then
Yeah, and it's
preventative is always better than trying to fix it. That's what we're saying.
always, and I think it's a good opportunity to talk to a local arborist,
Mm,
frankly, and
mm,
I think having an arborist even walk your property and do a consult with you and say, hey, these are the things I'm seeing.
right.
It doesn't mean, oh, I got to pay for X, Y, and Z, or I got to do a blanket spray across all my
Mm,
shrubs. Even being aware of the problem and getting educated from somebody that is aware of the local issues and can say, oh, I noticed you got 2 green ash in your backyard.
mm,
They found emerald ash borer about 30 miles away from here. Might be a good idea to consider preventative treatment. Or alternatively, maybe, oh, I see you got some ash trees. There's no EAB sited within 100 miles. So maybe don't
right.
worry about it now, but keep an eye on it. Because
Right.
that's, really good information that you might not get otherwise.
Yeah, absolutely. So, I mean, I think I think rather than just chasing down business, it's almost, trying to get that information from your tree service company into the hands of your customers now. It's easy to, it's easy to tell people, hey, spring's coming, we've got a deal on this thing. But maybe a good way of working this is to educate. Simple as that. Because I don't know
Yeah.
what I don't know.
I like I like newsletters personally. I have a number of clients that do a quarterly newsletter.
Mm.
And it's, for maybe new and emerging topics, but oftentimes they look pretty similar every year. Okay,
Yeah.
we're going into spring. These are the top three things you should kind of keep an eye on. Moving into summer now, transitioning, these are the things you should be worrying about or thinking about, whether that's like maybe adjust your irrigation schedule because of these climatic factors.
Yep.
Stuff that I think we absorb kind of secondhand through the radio and the weather report, but we're really not applying it in context to our landscape all the time because we just don't think that way.
Oh, yeah. And I wish more tree service companies would take their database of contacts and past clients seriously and send
Yeah.
out newsletters, particularly the educational ones. That's a great way of growing your company as well. And it's amazing how many people don't do that.
Yeah. I mean, it establishes a lot of trust and it establishes you as a professional, frankly.
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
somebody that knows what they're talking about. And it's, it's nice to present it as an FYI too, because yes, is that going to be a great revenue producer in some context? Sure. Yeah, you'll get some calls. Oh, I didn't know that I should be doing this, and maybe you can send somebody out for me. A lot of times people just respect the heck out of it because it's like,
Mm.
oh man, this company's like feeding me this information that's in a lot of ways tailor made to at least my situation, which is
Yeah.
great.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So I'm curious as well. Can you almost have just a plant healthcare company, or can your plant healthcare division outgrow your production division, your cutting division?
I
Is
would
that
say I do have clients that are 100% plant healthcare. That's all they do.
Mm.
That's for the most part all they've ever done. With that all being said, I mean, it is kind of seasonal, in
Mm.
places that are temperate. Um, it just depends on how long your winter lasts. Because
Right?
once trees go into
Right.
dormancy, there are certain things you can do. We tout supplemental watering in the Intermountain West a lot, or winter watering, as a lot of people call it.
Mhm.
But the fact of the matter is, if it's so cold that your water's going to freeze, you can't really go out and do that
Right.
work.
Right.
I think I have maybe 5 or 6 clients out of hundreds that have their plant healthcare division rivaling their trim division. So 50-50. That is not very typical.
Mm.
I would say 20-80, 30-70, 40-60 skew is a lot more
Right.
common. 40
Right.
and 40-60, that's a lot of plant healthcare.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah. So a balanced approach, though, generally.
yeah, yeah, and I think it's good because, especially if you have a trim and removal department, you can still utilize that labor from your plant healthcare in the off season.
Mm.
Oh, we need groundies. Maybe you put up
Mm.
Christmas lights. Maybe you do some other kind
Mm.
of seasonal thing
Right.
that you can use them for. And yeah, I mean, I think that's a really foolproof way to do it. With that
Right.
being said, like I mentioned, I have a couple folks that plant healthcare is all they do, April to September. They're out there, they're very busy, and they take a lot of the winter off, which is
Mm.
that's nice too.
Yeah, absolutely. Awesome. Joe, any books that you would recommend anybody to read? I love asking.
Ooh,
This is my new question, is because
yeah,
people have so many different things they read and books and so
sure.
forth. I'm thinking, if I wanted to get into plant healthcare, maybe as somebody like yourself who actually wants to
Sure.
work in it full time.
Well, I think let's see. Do I got my bookshelf behind me? I sure do.
Pressure's on.
Oh, so this is put out by the Rocky Mountain Research Station and the USDA. It's called Diseases of Trees in the Great Plains. This is
Uh-huh.
a fantastic book. Anything by Whitney Cranshaw. He is a former professor emeritus from Colorado State University.
Hmm.
He has done extensive research on all kinds of insects and diseases in the Intermountain West. He's fantastic. He still runs the kind of speaking circuit in this area. He's a really quirky, awesome, fun guy, good writer, great presenter. Those are the two kind of big ones I rely on. Any publication that's put out by a local university extension
Mm.
has just a wealth of information that somebody
Mm.
wants to get into plant healthcare. If you have any, and this is less of kind of like book reading, but if you have a municipality that has a robust program, a lot of times they will put out publications, and they're
Mm.
usually in the form of leaflets or what we might consider as tree care companies kind of like marketing material,
Right.
but
Right.
it's very succinct and informative and digestible. Those are great resources as well.
And I guess for anybody wanting to get into the plant healthcare, I'll call it industry, there is, I mean, this is an ever growing industry now, I suppose. Right. A lot of opportunities for people.
Yeah, I mean, if you want to get into it as an applicator, I mean, first steps are going to be getting your license, certainly. Um, and depending on the tree care company that you may be planning on working for or want to consider working for, they have subsidized programs a lot of the time. That's how
Right.
I got my license originally. You know, I started with
Right.
a local tree care company in Denver, and they said, hey, we're going to train you to do the plant healthcare operations. And in a lot of states, you can do that underneath somebody with a license. And then you gain a lot of experience. They send you off to take their tests. They'll pay the whatever fee to get you licensed, because that's really, really valuable for a tree care company.
Right.
Because
Right.
oftentimes those licenses mean that they can have, depending on the state, they can have more employees doing that.
Mm.
So example for Colorado, I have a qualified supervisor applicator license in a couple categories. I can have, let's say, 10 people, 10 employees underneath me that are totally unlicensed that can
Ah,
be doing plant
wow.
healthcare services.
Got
That
it.
does not work that same way for every state, but
Right.
it
Right.
can, and it's something to look into.
That's interesting. And let's have a quick plug for Rainbow EcoScience.
Yeah.
Tell us a little
Absolutely.
bit about that company there that you work for, and
Well, it's a pretty cool company. I came upon it meeting my own rep when I was working commercial tree care, and would do a lot of the things that I do with my clients. You know, they would come and train us, do talks, educational events. I'd see them at trade shows, and their job always just seemed so awesome to me. The history of Rainbow in 1976, thereabouts, the United States was dealing with a severe problem with Dutch elm disease. North America as a whole really was. We were losing American elms left and right. Our founder, Tom Prosser, during that time, working with the University of Minnesota, found out an effective, long-lasting treatment for Dutch elm disease. And it's preventative, as
ah,
like I mentioned, so many of
mm,
these things are.
mm,
And he kind of developed the technique to apply the chemical. He worked with the University of Minnesota to do research trials around it. And that was the genesis of our company. We
mm.
still have 50,000 American elms in the Twin Cities in Minnesota under our protection. And we've had like a 1% failure rate in that
Wow.
time since the 1970s. During
Mm,
that time, we've brought on different protocols. We've got new chemicals brewing. We got new equipment to apply said chemicals. And we have a extensive research and development division. I mean, that's one of my most liked
mm,
things about the company I work for.
mm.
We have a team of 3 or 4 folks with a research lead that does 150 unique research trials every
Mm.
year, whether that's with a different pest, insect, disease, chemical, piece of equipment, and that's happening all across the United States. We go with municipalities, we do
Mm.
work with universities, we do work with large commercial tree care companies and small ones. Um, and yeah, I mean, I truly think we're the best at what we do. Not the only game in town, and I think a lot of other companies have really novel equipment and novel chemistries, but very seldomly are you going to have people such as myself and my 15 other coworkers that will be on your doorstep every single time that you're going to actually need to get started or actually need an in-person consultation. So that's kind of what I have to say about
That's
that.
awesome. You seem, I mean, your excitement for the company and what you do is through the roof.
Yeah,
It's fantastic.
and we are employee owned too, so some of that I do have a vested interest.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
No, super exciting. Joe, we're coming up to the hour here. Where can people find you if they want to get in touch and get a little geeky about plant health?
Yeah, absolutely. And that's, I wouldn't call it a service, but oftentimes I will just have customers call me and talk about trees. And that's my favorite part of the job.
Nice.
It's awesome. But rainbowecoscience.com is a great place to go. You can do ordering, browse our chemicals and equipment. There's also an entire events page. And while we're kind of getting down to the end of our webinar season, we do free webinars that provide ISA certified credits and myriad of different topics, kind of covering different things around the United States. Check out that schedule. We also have in-person events that you can freely sign up for there, usually associated with credits as well.
Cool. Very cool.
Yeah. And then, if you wanted to reach me specifically, jboffa at rainbowecoscience.com, 720-854-8212. Happy to talk about it.
Awesome. And you're on LinkedIn as well, I think.
Yep.
Right? I can find you there too. Joe, it's fantastic to have you here. I really appreciate you sharing your knowledge and experience in plant healthcare, which is certainly something people are talking about for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. Happy to be on. Thank you for having me. This was a lot of fun.
I will speak to you again in the future, I'm sure. Thanks so much.
All right. Sweet. Have a good one.
You too.